Hey guys, what's going on? Hey, thank you for joining me again. I really do appreciate it. I do enjoy hanging out with you guys in the comments when you start typing and offering your own opinion about the subject. So today, what's the subject? Today's subject is independent front suspension versus solid axle. And my goal today is to break down the advantages and disadvantages, and I'll give you some of what I think I would prefer in one environment versus the other towards the end. All right, so hey, independent front suspension, it's exactly that. Your wheels and tires, they move independently of one another. They're not tied together at all. And then the solid axle, as it may sound, is a solid axle between your wheels, basically, and they're tied together. One goes up, the other goes down. And that is the fundamental difference. Now, let's talk about some pros and cons. Trying to get right down to it for you guys, trying to stay focused. I don't want to ramble. You guys' time is valuable. I'm not going to sit here and start talking about, okay, so independent front suspension, advantages. Well, at speed, it's more comfortable and a bit more responsive because the wheels and tires can move independently of one another. And so you can kind of bomb through the desert. That's why Baja racers, trophy trucks, and things of that nature have independent front suspension. Now, that's a really strong suspension setup, right? So the argument about strength comes into question when you see that Baja trophy trucks and things of that nature are independent front suspension. They can be a very durable suspension. But that's the main advantage, is that it's more responsive on the front end, okay? Now, what are some of the disadvantages of the independent front suspension? Well, it is a more complex setup, and what that means is that if it does break, or you do want to upgrade it, it can be more expensive to do so on the independent front suspension. You can't just get a bigger axle or a better axle as you can on the solid axle. So that is a disadvantage. Also, at low speeds, arguably, you're not going to get the traction you will get with the solid axle. So now let's talk about that for a second. Let's transition real quick to solid axle, talk about advantages and disadvantages. So advantages, is it a bit old school? Yeah, it's a bit old school. It's reliable, it's tried and true. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Solid axle is a much simpler design. Makes it less expensive to maintain and upgrade. And so that can translate to reliability in some situations. Now, again, the solid axle tied together. So in slow rock crawling, you can actually get better traction as this tire goes up and this tire is forced down, and vice versa. You can get better traction at low speeds with a solid axle setup. What are some of the disadvantages of solid axle? Well, you'll hear this time and time again. Everybody, once you start digging into it, you'll hear a solid axle isn't as comfortable inside the cab. There you got a lot more head bobbing because that axle is tied together and there's more movement inside the cab as a result. You don't have independent front suspension where your wheel can just do whatever it wants on one side of the vehicle. So it does translate to a little bit rougher ride for your passengers. And so really quickly, guys, that's kind of the breakdown of independent front suspension versus solid axle. Let's break it down. Independent front suspension, really good at high speeds, more comfortable, very much more responsive as you're bombing down the trail. Disadvantages, more complex setup, can be more expensive to maintain or upgrade. Solid axle, it is a bulletproof design. It's a much more simple design, therefore can be more reliable in extreme rock crawling type situations, easier to maintain and upgrade. Disadvantage is it's going to toss you all over the cab. A little bit of an exaggeration, but that's what you'll hear. Is there's more head bobbing in a solid axle rig vehicle. So, solid axle vehicle. Now, let's take two different scenarios. What would I use? So for most of what I do, I'll take the solid axle in the FJ80 right now because I do a lot of, here in the Sierra, rock crawling. When Corey and I go out there to find, a year-round stream that we want to camp next to out in the middle of no place, away from everyone, we're usually going to be slow crawling over rocks. to arrive at that destination. I like my solid axle in those conditions. Now, if I were going to be bombing down through Baja or at higher speed on the trail, I would go independent front suspension under those scenarios and those conditions. And that's kind of the consideration that you'll have to go through. So what's right for you? You're going to get more comfort. You're going to get a lot more responsiveness, independent responsiveness on the independent front suspension. If you're going to do really some rock crawling and you're going to be driving slower on the trail, you might consider a solid axle. That's it, you guys. I hope that was useful. You guys, throw your comments. You guys, such a great community. You're awesome and so experienced. Put some of that experience down in the comments. We want to hear from you. And also, you guys, I'm going to do another plug for our app. Android, it's out there right now. iOS is coming up in the next few days. If you got an Android phone, go and get it. You can engage in this conversation on the app as well. And I think you guys are really going to like it. It's very easy to use on your phone. That's it, you guys. Thanks for hanging out with me. Really appreciate it. Until next time, in just a few days, just a couple days, maybe 3. I'll talk to you soon. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Bye.